So I started out as a musician, playing Dixieland, jazz, soul, to finance my studies. And then I had to make a decision whether I would want to stay on the stage and earn lots of money, as I did then, or try an academic career and earn little money at that stage. And that got me interested in decision making under uncertainty, because I could not know whether I will ever make it to a professor at a good university. While for me, music was the safe option. So I decided to take the risk and try an academic career. So this is an example about decision making under uncertainty, because I could never know what the future brings. And I started to analyze how I made myself decisions. And in this case, I did not sit down and write all the possible consequences of the decision, because I could not know them, nor could I attach probabilities. But it was heuristic decision making. So I basically thought, what is the most important thing? It's not money. If it would have been money, I would have stayed on the stage. And for me, it was that the question, would I want to stay for the rest of my life on the stage and do entertainment music, or would I try the challenge to do something new? And that's what I did. So that's a short introduction in where I come from, what motivated me. And then I started to already studied statistics. So I looked at the limits, how far you can get with probability theory and statistics, and you can get quite far, but not, for instance, to the most important decisions like the one I had to do, and got interested in heuristic decision making. So how do people deal with an uncertain world? So first, it's important to understand that the standard classical theory, or the, for instance, the now dominant theory in many fields like economics, behavioral economics, and other fields, is expected utility maximization. And if you don't know the probabilities, Bayesian updating. No. This is a beautiful theory, but it assumes that a small world, this is Jimmy Savage's term, a small world where you actually can know all the future states and consequences, and then you can attach probabilities. And that's is so-called also the limits. So expected utility theory is not, as many people think, a very general theory. No, it is restricted to small worlds, which is a world that's called risk. So Frank Knight, the economist, talked about risk versus uncertainty. So, and I'm interested in extending the theory of decision-making from risk to uncertainty. Now, and that's also Herbert Simon's original program. So what is uncertainty? One needs to be very clear about that, because it's often used for risk. So when Kahneman and Tversky write about judgment and uncertainty, they mean risk.
Okay.
So these are all problems which can be dealt with probability theory. So my own decision problem is one of uncertainty. And Herbert Simon's program was to extend the theory of decision-making from small worlds of risk. These are, again, a small world is a situation where you know every future state of the world. You can enumerate them and all of their consequences. So the the exhaustive and mutually exclusive set of all future states and their consequences. And if you can, in addition, estimate the probabilities reliably, then it's risk. If you can't do that, that's uncertainty. Sorry, that's ambiguity. Uncertainty starts when you don't know the state space, which is the case in investment. You don't know all the possible consequences. And if you build models, like they have been built before the last financial crisis, and then the Russian problem hit in, and then there's surprise. And then optimization turns into the fragile situation, and it breaks down. So the Herbert Simon wanted to do basically three things. One is to extend decision-making from mere risk to uncertainty. So from expected utility maximization, including all its modifications like prospect theory, which are for situations of risk, to uncertainty. Second, he wanted to make models about how people make decisions as opposed to as-if models. So if you're in the expected utility maximization world, you have to assume, you can't really argue that people do this in their brains, these complicated calculations. But you have to argue, as Milton Friedman did, we are not really interested in the psychological processes. We are just saying that people behave as if they would maximize something. So that was Herbert Simon's second point. We are interested in how people make decisions, not as if. And the third one was that in order to understand behavior, you must not simply look at cognition, but also at the environment. And his famous metaphor of the pair of scissors means that one blade is cognition, one blade is environment. And the challenge is to understand how the two blades work together to cut well. So that's his program. And we are still today far away. I use the term ecological rationality because Simon's term bounded rationality has been hijacked and turned into the opposite. So for instance, it had actually been hijacked twice. Classical economists use, I should say neoclassical economists, use the term bounded rationality for optimization under constraints. Herb Simon once told me, half joking, that he wanted to sue his colleagues in economics departments to misuse his term for optimization. That's exactly what he didn't want. He wanted to deal with decision-making under uncertainty, where you, by definition, can't optimize. Okay? That's the one misuse. And the second misuse became when bounded rationality was identified with irrationality. That happened in the Kahneman and Tversky program. Simon said very clearly, bounded rationality is not irrationality. It's not about the errors. It is about how people make decisions in the real world of uncertainty, studying the process, and also studying the match between the environment and cognition. If you only look at cognition, then some of the heuristics that people use, like to imitate others, to rely on the best reason, or to satisfy, look stupid, but only if you only look at the cognition and forget the environment where they need to be worked. So
Okay.
the use of the term bounded rationality in the Tversky-Kahneman program is not Simon's meaning. It is about of lack of rationality. And so that's an important difference. And it's also very clear that when you read, for instance, the 1982 anthology of Kahneman and Tversky's papers, which is about the big influential papers in the 70s, you will not find in these papers a citation to Herbert Simon or the term bounded rationality. That came as an afterthought, probably a nod to the important person, Herbert Simon, after he got his Nobel Prize in 78. So that's an afterthought, and it distorted Simon's program. So there are several visions of behavioral economics. One is Simon's original vision, and I've just sketched that. Investigate the process of decision-making under uncertainty and how that matches with the structure of environment. The Kahneman-Tversky program is a different one. It uses problems where you already know what the best answer is, or at least where researchers believe they know what the best answer is. So there's no uncertainty. And then designs on problems where people's judgment differs from what the researcher believes is right. And the difference is then called a bias. So the Kahneman and Tversky program, to some extent, models the process, but not really far. So Tversky, before he met Kahneman, did models of heuristic like elimination by aspect. But later, it just were words like representativeness, availability, and even later, after Tversky died, it became mere dichotomies, like system 1 versus system 2. And so that's a change from modeling, as Tversky did, to merely labels and dichotomies. But in a limited way, it's about the process. That differs from the Milton Friedman type of neoclassical economics. And on the ecological side, on the Herbert Simon's scissors analogy, studied how a process matches with the environment. There is little to nothing in this program of behavioral economics, because it's always assumed that a principle of logical probability theory would give you the context-free or content-blind notion of rationality, and that's compared with human judgment. So what I wanted to say, there are several different programs of behavioral economics. And I try in my research with my colleagues to resurrect Herbert Simon's original vision, and we've extended it to questions and horizons where Herbert Simon had no time to do that. For instance, we have shown that in many situations, a heuristic that only looks at one variable or two and ignores the rest can lead to better and more accurate decisions than an entire linear model. And not only more accurate, but also faster and more frugal. And after the end, our human brain needs to be efficient, not to waste its time on every little decision problem. So let's be clear what intuition is. Intuition is a kind of unconscious intelligence. It's a feeling that is based on years of experience. Second, it's a feeling that comes quickly to one's mind, that one should do this or not do that. And third, the person with the feeling cannot explain it. So intuition is not a sixth sense and also not something God put into our minds. It's also nothing that only females have. Yeah? Everyone has intuition. And it's not general. Intuition is about a certain topic where one has experience. For instance, a doctor who sees a patient may feel today something is wrong with the patient, but not be able to explain it. That's an intuition. It's based on years of experience. The feeling is quickly there, and the doctor cannot explain it. But then the doctor will proceed and do diagnostics deliberately. So this is an example that also illustrates that one should not put intuition against deliberate thinking. These are two tools of the mind that go together, that work together. And it's a big error in our society, and also part of my dear colleagues who think that deliberate thinking is always better, and you should avoid intuition. No. For instance, a study of 17 Nobel laureates found that when they're being asked, how did you get to your breakthrough? Most of them said it's going back and forth between analysis and intuition, and analysis and intuition. And so one needs to take intuition seriously and not confuse it with the arbitrary decision-making of an inept politician, or with just, if something goes wrong, just attribute it to intuition. Without intuition, there would be little innovation. And those who argue against intuition do not seem to understand that it is the essence of science. It's the essence of business. And it's the essence of art. Einstein once said, and he was a man who had an appreciation for his own intuitions. He said, the intuitive mind is a heavenly gift, and the rational mind is its servant. We have created a society in which one prays to the servant and has forgotten about the gift. That's Einstein. And if you read Steve Jobs or many great inventors, you will find a deep appreciation for their intuition. A large part of behavioral economics has not gotten the point. So the great physiologist Hermann von Helmholtz, he worked here in Berlin, where I live. He coined the term unconscious inferences. And that was in the context of how we perceive the world. So the problem is, we think often, that's easy, we just look outside of the window and then we see the world. But we have to make an inference from what's on our retina, which is basically two-dimensional, to a three-dimensional world. And how do we do that? And we do not notice how we do that. And that's what he meant with unconscious inference. And it's heuristics all the way down. So we use, for instance, in order to, if you have ever seen the famous Ramachandran dots, that's these are dots that we either see popping out or being curved inside. And how do we see that? And if you rotate them, then they change they turn from popping into popping out and so on. And how do we do this? And the brain makes an unconscious inference. If the shade is on the top, then versus on the bottom, then we infer the shade is on the top, it's going inside. If it's on the bottom, it's going outside, because the brain assumes, first, the world is three-dimensional. This is the inference we're making. And second, that light comes from above. And when the light is from above, the shade is in the lower part. And so these are these types of inferences where one can, where scientists analyze, and they're made intuitively, and they're often based only a few smart cues, like that the light comes from above and there is only one source of light, which has been the case for most of human evolution, and it's mostly still true today. Light comes from above. And and that kind of intuitive inferences, they can be analyzed. Just like one can analyze how baseball outfielder catch a ball. And if you ask them, how do you do this? Most of them cannot explain how they do it. It's intuitive. But one can analyze how it works. And the studies clearly show that baseball outfielders do not try to calculate the trajectory of the ball. And the problem is not calculation, it is estimation of the initial angle with which a ball has been thrown, the initial velocity. But they use a couple of smart heuristics. For instance, when the ball is high up in the air, the heuristic is fixate the ball with your eye, start running, and adjust the running speed so that the angle of gaze always remains constant. And then you can see you will be there where the ball comes down without calculating the trajectory. So these are examples about how we can analyze the decision process that is in this case unconscious, and the heuristic on which it's based that creates the success. And one can also see the limits of this particular heuristic. It doesn't work if a ball comes straight at you, like in ping pong. And then in our research, we take this analysis of the unconscious heuristic and teach the heuristic explicitly to managers, to experts, to others. And here is an example where the gaze heuristic saved lives. So remember the miracle of the Hudson River some years ago. So a plane took off from LaGuardia in New York, and after a few minutes, something totally unexpected happened. A flock of Canada geese collided with the plane. And the jet engines of modern planes are designed so that they can digest birds. But Canada geese are too big, too fat. And the improbable event happened that they flew in both turbines. And the engines shut down, and it got silent in the plane. And the pilots had to make a decision. Can we reach the next airport, or do we need to go, as it happened, in the Hudson River? How did they make the decision? Now you might think they tried to calculate the trajectory of the sailing plane. No. They used the same heuristic that the baseball outfielders use, the gaze heuristic. In this case, they fixated through the windshield the next airport, so maybe the tower of the next airport. And if the tower went up in their windshield, then they knew they will hit before it. And that's how Skiles, the co-pilot, described this. And in many domains, including for pilots, this type of heuristics are told or are taught explicitly, so they can use them. And in that case, it helped that they did not crash for the airport, and together with many other things like the excellent behavior of the crew, no life was lost. Yeah, that's a great question. Now, just let me repeat for the listeners what who he was and what he did. So there is a great psychologist, a Russian psychologist called Luria, who studied Shereshevsky, who was a reporter. And Luria did not find the limits of Shereshevsky's memory. So Shereshevsky could read a page, and it took him some time, and then recall it completely, forwards and backwards. It's a kind of visual memory. And Shereshevsky could read a mathematical equation, whether it made sense or not, and recall it. And even 10 years later. So different from a human expert, here maybe a mathematician, who will be able to remember a mathematical formula that makes sense. Shereshevsky remembered everything. So we know from chess players, from experts, they can remember a position exactly, but only if it makes sense. It's not a random position. For Shereshevsky, he remembered everything. And here we see the price one would have to pay if every one of us would have an unlimited memory. Namely, the difficulty to distinguish between the meaningful and the not meaningful. So Shereshevsky could remember every detail of his life, whether it was important or not. And there is a reason why we have limited memory, despite we often, and certainly I, would wish to remember more precisely. But on the other hand, it helps to abstract. It helps to focus on the important and forget all the rest. And the nearest artificial intelligence that comes close to Shereshevsky is an artificial neural network. It remembers almost everything, and it needs to learn the ability to separate the important from the non-important. And there's a reason why we are not like deep artificial neural networks. Because one of our unique human capacities is to somehow understand what's important and what's not. And this is still a problem for the best deep neural networks, that they focus on cues that are really not important, and then cannot read a traffic sign if you just put a few strange dots on it. And there are also a competitive AI that tries to find out the weakness of these neural networks and exploit them and make them systematically error. And the interesting thing is humans err too, yeah, but in very different ways than deep neural networks makes error. And that has also told us something about our human intelligence. And it also makes clear that even if you have more data and more computing power, deep artificial neural networks will not reach the intelligence that humans have. It's a different intelligence. It works best like in well-defined, stable situations like chess, Go, and even systems like large language models have a stable corpus of words and their associations on which they work. We have developed to make good decisions in an uncertain world where surprises happen. It's not like chess, where the rules are fixed and for eternity. It's more like a chess game where the king violates the rules, the queen is pissed off, and she walks off the board and sets the rocks on fire. So we have to deal with these situations. The deep neural networks, they do best if everything is predictable. So again, a big question. We have some evidence that some of the heuristics that are in the toolbox of humans are also in the toolbox of other animals. The gaze heuristic that I mentioned before is an example. So the way an outfielder catches a fly ball is based on the same heuristic as a hawk intercepts a dove. And basically flying so that the angle of gaze between the dove and the hawk always remains constant. And then there's the interception point. So we know about a number of heuristics that go from the animal kingdom into the humans and even into technology. The gaze heuristic is again an example. It's also used for rocket design. And here it's the temperature of an object. It is going, keeping the angle constant when the other object changes the time. So that's a very interesting type of research to try to understand how evolution works to deal with uncertainty and gives animals a number of clever strategies that work well in their own environment. The danger then is if something like global warming hits in, and which is unexpected, then quite a number of species will die out. And it may also happen to humans. Imitation, for instance, are one of the most important heuristics, social heuristics, like imitate your peers or imitate the successful, is also used by animals, particularly by other primates. But as Mike Tomasello showed, the interesting difference is that human children imitate much more precisely exactly your behavior and much more generally than, for instance, young chimpanzees. And here is one of the basics of culture. So how does culture develop? Why don't have other animals a cultural development? And one of the key ingredients is imitation. That the ability to imitate what the last generation has achieved. If you don't have that heuristic, then we have to start from scratch with individual learning. Yeah. So the Adaptativo book has a number of heuristics, and they can be classified into social heuristic like imitation or advice giving or tit for tat, and other heuristics that exploit different cognitive core capacities. And so core capacities are, for instance, the ability to recognize faces, names, and others, and the recognition heuristic builds on that. Or the fluency, so that we make estimates from the speed in which an option comes to our mind. That has been shown by Gary Klein and others as being a key ingredient for decision-making by firefighters, military decision-making, where you have to make fast decisions. And these decisions are very different than what standard decision theory thinks a decision is. It's not a choice between two or more options. Rather, one option comes to mind. And the experienced firefighter goes after the first option, unless it cannot be executed in the situation, and then goes after the second one. And studies show that fluency, so that an option comes faster to mind than another one, that humans have a very precise ability to distinguish between the speed with when options come to mind. And in the case of the fluency heuristic, you need to have experience with a topic, like a firefighter with burning houses, or a handball player with the game. And only if there is year-long experience, then the best options come first. And it's again a mechanism that underlies intuition, because this process is not conscious. But the way to get there, it can be conscious. So these are some examples of classes of heuristics. And others have the structure of dominance. So the human mind can easily prioritize things. So order and heuristics like take the best or fast and frugal trees exploit that. And I invite you to just everyone to study the heuristic that people use. And also the question is, in what situation does a certain heuristic work? If you rely on fluency and you have no experience with a topic, forget it. Yeah. If you want to want me to answer this question in one word, no. It's an old myth, and it's a way to talk badly about women. So in the 19th century, into the 20th century, the standard psychology theory was that women are intuitive. They are fast. So they talk fast and don't think too much. They are associative, and they lack abstract thinking and are on the concrete side, and therefore they are also not responsibility for if they steal or lie, because they cannot capture the abstract principle of morality. On the other hand, males are deliberate, they think, they are rational, they are slow because it takes time, and they can abstract, and of course they can think and about moral principles. And not accidentally, historically, almost all moral philosophers were male. So that was the dichotomy. There was a list of oppositions that were believed into the 20th century. And you may, if you know about the current system 1, system 2 dichotomies, they are almost the same. So an old prejudice has come back. Now it's no longer called male versus female. It's called system 2 and system 1. No. So back to the intuition is based on years of experience. And females will only have better experience if they have better intuition, if there's more experience with a certain topic. So there is, the studies I know, they do not show this old prejudice, because notice for centuries, males were put over females, and at least since Enlightenment, reason over intuition. And the idea that women are intuitive is just put the two on the second place together. And it's still in modern theories, is now just cleansed from the male-female dimension. So don't believe in that. And it's also, it's a dangerous thing because it's still be used to put women down, saying they're intuitive, and intuition is then also linked to esoteric issues, to unreliability, to untrustworthy, the entire old story. Instead, study the intuitions that baseball players have, that golf players have, that scientists have, and how they interact with deliberate thinking. So we are often back in this old opposition between males and female and intuition and reason. No. Just like men need women and vice versa, intuition and reason need each other. And we should stop this opposition. So the AI means many things. And I take it now, AI meaning deep artificial neural networks. Deep artificial neural networks are statistical procedures which basically calculate correlations. And that could be in picture recognition, correlations between pixels, or in large language models, correlations between words. But it's correlations, period. It's basically a nonlinear multiple regression based on tons of data, recursive, and they can do amazing things. Human intelligence is different. It is based on causal thinking. Causal thinking, if you have a little child, you may experience that she is asking always, why? Why? Why do I have to eat broccoli? Why do the neighbors have a bigger car? That's human nature, trying to do causal inferences. And that's very hard to do for a statistical regression type model. Second, humans have spatial intuitions and social intuitions. And we know there is an intuitive psychology. We know that other people have intentions, that words refer to something outside. How could a deep neural network know that? It's about correlations between words, not about the reference of a word to a world outside. Humans also have an intuitive physics. So we know that two solid objects cannot penetrate each other. And already very small children know that. And then we have also an intuitive sociality, where we are social beings. We care about others, not everyone, but most. And also we depend on the opinion on others. For many teenagers, nothing is more important than the opinion of others being accepted. And for some adults, it's still the case. And so this is a rough difference between the two. And one should not think that if you have a regression type statistical model, that would be the same process like human intelligence. It's not. It's really different. And one can easily see the AI can do calculations where no human comes even clear. Yeah. And we can do other things. We have an understanding of the world that the best AI doesn't have. And one shouldn't confuse that. One shouldn't believe that just computational power, as Kurzweil argues, will then generate something that is similar in our intelligence and goes beyond it. No, it's different. It will go beyond it in certain respects, that where a stable world is, it's more like the concept of risk. With uncertainty, the best deep neural networks have big problems. So predicting human behavior is very difficult. And as opposed to playing chess. And in applications like predicting recidivism, which is possible in US courts, or predictive policing that's tried also in Europe, there is no evidence that these AI applications do better than experienced judges or police. But it's a business to be sold. And since most judges have no training in statistics or AI, and then there is also the tendency to believe in that some application would work everywhere. So there's big business being made.
Of course. Sorry.
And it's important to ask the question, like about heuristics, what problems can current AI models solve better and faster than humans? And there are a number. And where does it not work? That's the real question. But as you know, and I've hinted at, even very respectable persons tell us that AI may endanger us because it will be transhuman, and even the idea that we will be exhibited in zoos for a future world of robots, or maybe just killed away. I think these are distractions from the real problem. The problem is not AI. AI isn't good or bad. The problem are the people behind AI. The intentions of an Elon Musk, a Zuckerberg, a Putin, a Xi, or a North Korean ruler. What they're going to do with that. It's like nuclear power is not good or bad. It's the question what do you do with it. What I worry about the misuse of AI is war, as we are seeing it now. It's getting more and more a war of drones, and also a war in digital war, and the increasing desire of governments and tech companies to surveil us, to know everything they can know about us, and then, of course, to manipulate us, including our votes, as we have seen with Cambridge Analytica in trying to influence Brexit and also the election of President Trump. So I think that we are sleepwalking into surveillance. We're not noticing, and we are not wanting to really notice it. And the Black Mirror series you mentioned, Downwards, is a good example. I recommend everyone to watch it. It's a story about a young woman who lives in a world where everyone rates everyone. So everyone has a social score that ranges from 1 to 5, like Amazon scores. And for instance, if you take a ride with a taxi, you rate the taxi driver rates you. If you're in a restaurant, everyone rates everyone. And in part, we are already living in this world. If you have an Uber ride, then you rate the Uber driver rates you. And restaurants are rated on the internet, and we are a slippery slope in that. So in the Netflix movie, then the young lady has a too low score for getting a better apartment. So she wants to increase her score. And what does she do? She practices in front of the mirror, smiling, nodding to everyone, and tries to change her behavior so that the others rate her higher. And at the end, it doesn't go well, but that's what you can see yourself. What that shows is a possible future that is quite likely to happen, where people start rating everyone else. It's different from the Chinese social credit system, where it's not people that are rating everyone else, but it's the government and the tech companies who rate you according to their own values. So that works something like that. Everyone has a social credit score. At the moment, it's still in an experimental phase with about 40 cities. So there are no general rules. And interestingly, the Chinese government does a huge experiment. So they give the cities the goal to develop something like that, but don't specify the way. So they want to learn. And so you have a score, and if you do something nice, like visiting your old parents, you get a higher score, and your total life, including where you are and how long you are, is anyhow monitored by your smartphone. And if you do something that is not in the spirit of the government, like entering a search term Dalai Lama, then it goes down. And people are then rewarded if they have a high score. And the rewards, they differ. For instance, you may be treated first in a hospital, and the others have to wait if you have a higher score. Or those with low scores are punished, and for instance, that you cannot send your children to the best private schools. And that makes you think twice whether you wouldn't conform. So that's a vision of a world where people have one goal, which is their social credit score, and to increase it and avoid that it goes down. It's the opposite vision of a democracy. And also, it takes out the values from people's hands and the multiplicity of values and it into one of conformity and surveillance. The Germans should be one of those who should most be worried about these developments, because in Germany we had the Stasi, and even before we had other governments that would have been happy to have a surveillance system where they can find out where everyone is, who talks to what, and what they talk. But it's not the case. I've done some surveys in Germany and asked a representative sample of more than 3,000 people, 18 years and older, whether they would want something like the Chinese social credit system. And before the COVID pandemic, it was only 9% who thought that's something good that we also should have. Now, last year, it has increased to 20%. And that's a worrisome result. And we looked at whether it's more young people or older people who would want to have this surveillance system, and it's the younger. And the younger, meaning between 18 and 30 years, it's up to 27%. So we need more people who think about the values of individual freedom, and not just that there may be another source to get some goodies if they behave properly. That's what I mean with sleepwalking into surveillance. So let's start with an example. Assume you're a doctor and you do mammography screening. A woman who in the screening group has a positive test, and she wants to know from you, what does it mean? Do I have now breast cancer? Or how likely is it? 99%, 90, 50, please tell me. So every doctor should be able, at least every gynecologist should be able to answer this question. So when we tested, I've taught about 1,000 gynecologists in the continuing medical education, and I gave them the numbers they need in case they don't know. So assume in this region where the screening is done, the base rate for breast cancer in the group of people who go to screening is 1%. The probability that a woman tests positive if she has breast cancer is 90%. And the probability that a woman just tests positive if she doesn't have cancer is 9%. So we have a prevalence or base rate of 1%, a sensitivity of 90%, and a false positive rate of 9%. Okay? This woman in this group, and you know nothing else about her, just tested positive. What do you tell her? What's her chance that she actually has breast cancer? If now you have fog in your mind, that's the typical feeling that doctors have. They have had no training in understand base rule. That's basically what it is about. So we have developed and tested a method that relies on the human psychology. Human psychology was never built to deal with conditional probabilities like sensitivities, the probability that you test positive if you have a disease, but to frequencies. And not relative frequencies, which are also the same as the sensitivities, but what we call natural frequencies that are not normalized. Now I give you the same problem again, now in natural frequencies. So what I'm doing is I translate the terms, the prevalence, the sensitivity, the false positive rate in just frequency numbers, okay? And now you will likely see through without any training in Bayes. So here, so think about 100 women. We expect that one of them has breast cancer. It's a prevalence. And she likely will test positive. That's the 90% sensitivity. From the 99 who do not have breast cancer, we expect another 9 to test positive. That's the false positive. Right? I'm rounding here, make it simple. So we have 9 plus 1 who test positive. How many of them do actually have breast cancer? It's 1 out of 10. Okay? That's called natural frequency. And it helps experts and lay people, in this case doctors and patients, to understand what a test result means. And it works as well with HIV testing or with COVID-19 tests and anything like that that has the Bayesian nature. We have managed that the term natural frequency is now a technical term in evidence-based medicine. And in Germany, we have managed that in 11th grade, where previously in mathematics, Bayes' rule was taught in conditional probabilities, it's now taught in natural frequencies. And some of my previous students who are now professors, they have shown that the previous teaching with conditional probabilities, if you wait a few days, then 90% of the students don't understand it. But when they show them natural frequencies, as we did it now, which I'd never heard of, they immediately get it. So it's very important, that's the general point, to teach mathematics in a way that's intuitive for the human mind. And if you look back at the human history, then one should avoid concepts that are difficult and recent. And natural frequencies are concrete cases, and you can represent them as trees or in other ways, and that supports understanding. And I have taught many, many doctors to understand tests with natural frequencies. I've taught lawyers, judges, and in the US, federal judges to understand evidence by natural frequency and similar techniques. So there is a way to help people to understand that works, and that's based on psychology. And that's what I think is progress over the program of pointing out that people fail on this type of problem. We need to do something to help people, not show that they fail.
Perfect. And the question of inferences and natural frequencies is also very relevant in our field, the field of law, as you have said. And it is not something which, unfortunately, is approached in our curriculum, in our schoolwork, so to speak. So
yeah. You're totally right, because you have, at least in forensic law, you have to do with evidence. So what's the evidence that there's a DNA match between the suspect and the source, the trace found on the victim? What does that mean? And our research got, for instance, into the O.J. Simpson trial. That was the first time. And where then the the expert witness was asked not to report in conditional probabilities, but in frequencies. And then you can see through, and it helps lawyers on the defense side and on the prosecution side to see through. And I've taught at the law school of the University of Virginia, the students, to understand these risks. And they loved it. And not necessarily because they thought about the Enlightenment, but they thought, now I can fool the prosecution if I'm a defense lawyer, or vice versa. But that's fine with me. At the end, if everyone understands, nobody can fool anymore the others. There is the concept of the probabilistic revolution in the sciences. And I've been part of a research group that has published a 2-volume called The Probabilistic Revolution in MIT Press some time ago. And also a book with 5 colleagues on the empire of chance. And it traces how probability changed the science. And that's a great development. But in my opinion, we need also a second revolution, which I call the heuristic revolution. Take uncertainty seriously. So the part where probability theory has problems to deal with because it needs a stable goal. And a heuristic revolution would allow us to enlarge our toolbox privately or in science to deal seriously with situations of uncertainty as opposed to pretend that it would be a situation of calculable risk. I've been most of my put it this way, most of my scientific life was in an interdisciplinary group. And when I became director of the Max Planck Institute in Berlin, and before in Munich, I built an interdisciplinary group of something like 30 or 35 researchers that came mostly on average at any time from about 8 or so different disciplines, like psychology, economics, the law, engineering, computer science, mathematics, philosophy, and others. And the point is, if you have an interdisciplinary group that works on the same topic, that's important, then everyone learns, including me. I have learned every day something new. And it also creates a structure that's not so hierarchical, because there are postdocs who know, in some respect, more than I, and I can learn from that. And in order to have an interdisciplinary group working, you need to create trust. That means that the members dare to ask about what they don't understand, rather than hide lack of knowledge. Trust and also collaboration. And it's also easier to have an open argument because everyone knows that his or her own knowledge is limited. And you need also people who are contrarians, who dare to speak up against the consensus of the group on a factual, respectful basis, or also about what I believe. And that's a kind of mental hygiene. And I've written an article on how to simple rules for setting up a research group on the basis of what I've done myself.
Perfect. So we seem to be out of time. I wanted to take this moment to thank you for accepting our request for an interview and providing us with such a clear and concise overview of your research and of your theories and modern psychological thought. It was truly a pleasure.
So it was a pleasure for me. And remember, you're young. And if you're smart, change the world.